All right, so today we're going to dive deep into Buddhist meditation.
Okay.
And to help us out, we've got teachings from Ajahn Khemasiri from his weekend retreat talks called Entrer dans une nouvelle réalité,
Right.
which means entering a new reality.
Exactly.
And we're going to be looking at all sorts of really interesting stuff from that.
Absolutely.
And I thought we could start off by,
Yeah.
Ajahn Khemasiri, he had this really kind of interesting experience that kind of ties into these teachings.
Yeah.
Where he was talking about being in Marseilles and just being totally overwhelmed by all the traffic and the chaos of the city.
It's true. It's a fascinating contrast
Yeah.
that he highlights, because you have this vision of a monk as, being in a peaceful monastery,
Right.
meditating all day.
Yeah.
But then here he is right in the thick of it in a very chaotic urban setting.
Yeah. So how do we kind of like bring those two things together?
Right.
Like, how do we take that kind of like monastic wisdom and apply it to our crazy
daily lives,
everyday lives?
Yeah. And that experience in Marseille actually directly inspires some of the things he talks about in these retreat talks.
Interesting.
He talks about how that experience made him really think about the challenges that we all face in modern life and how to find that inner peace amidst all the chaos.
So it's not just him kind of like, up in an ivory tower.
Exactly. It's very practical.
Yeah. This is practical stuff.
Very applicable to everyday life.
So what is it actually, we're talking about entering a new reality through meditation.
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
Well, one of the things he emphasizes right from the beginning is the importance of approaching meditation with a beginner's mind.
Okay.
No matter your experience level.
Okay.
And he uses this analogy. Imagine a child asking, why is the sky blue?
Okay.
They haven't taken it for granted yet. You see it with fresh eyes.
They're curious.
Exactly. That's the kind of curiosity he wants us to tap into.
So we're not just checking it off a to-do list. Like meditate, check.
It's not about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about cultivating that sense of wonder and curiosity.
Okay. So beginner's mind.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
One of the things I found really interesting about these talks was how Ajahn Khemasiri talks about dukkha. Yeah. And I think that's a word that often gets translated as suffering.
It does.
But he kind of goes a little bit deeper than that, right?
He does. Suffering can sound a bit heavy, especially if you're having a normal day, like a Tuesday afternoon. Yeah. And someone's like, you're suffering.
Yeah, like, thanks a lot.
So he digs a little deeper and describes dukkha more as this kind of fundamental dissatisfaction that's woven into the fabric of our existence.
Right.
It's that feeling that something's always a bit off.
Right.
Have you ever felt that?
Yeah.
Like something's just not quite right.
Yeah, like a subtle, like, is this it kind of feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
And I'd say most of us can relate to that feeling in our lives.
For sure.
At some point or another.
Totally. So, okay. So we've got this dukkha thing going on. It's kind of like underlying dissatisfaction.
Yeah. And it's within that context that he also highlights just how precious this human life is.
Okay.
And to illustrate this, he uses this really powerful analogy
I'm intrigued.
of a blind turtle that surfaces from the depths of the ocean once every 100 years.
All right.
Now imagine a single hoop floating somewhere on that vast expanse of ocean.
Okay.
The chances of that turtle surfacing right inside that hoop are astronomically small.
It's unlikely.
Very unlikely.
Yeah.
And that's how rare and valuable he's saying a human life is.
Okay.
It's that precious.
That's a really powerful image.
It is.
Like, if we could really let that sink in.
Yeah.
Like, how does that change how we approach second day?
That's the question he wants us to ask ourselves.
Why?
Because if we really understand how precious it is, then how would we live differently?
Right.
And here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
He cautions against approaching Buddhist teachings as just another to-do list.
Okay.
It's easy to fall into the trap of viewing things like the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path as just a set of steps to check off. Have you ever done that?
Totally.
Like with any kind of self-improvement thing?
Yes.
You get the book, you're like, okay, step 1.
Yeah, I did a check.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he emphasizes that these teachings are not about rigid adherence. They're meant to guide personal development.
Okay.
It's like you wouldn't learn carpentry by just memorizing the names of all the tools.
Yeah.
You have to actually use them.
You got to build something.
Exactly. You have to build something.
Yeah.
You have to apply the teachings.
Okay.
And that brings us to another crucial point he makes.
Okay.
Honesty over perfection.
Okay.
when starting on a spiritual path, it's tempting to just focus on our flaws.
Oh, yeah.
All the ways that we feel like we're not good enough.
All the shoulds.
The shoulds. Exactly.
I should be meditating more.
I'm not mindful enough.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it right.
Everyone else is doing it better.
Exactly. And he reminds us that it's important to acknowledge both our strengths and our weaknesses.
Okay.
He emphasizes that everyone has these inherent good qualities within them. Love, compassion, joy.
Mm-hmm.
These things are already there.
Okay.
We don't have to create them from scratch.
So it's about nurturing those rather than like beating ourselves up for not being enlightened already.
Exactly.
Right.
It's about recognizing that the potential is there.
Okay, I like that.
And just as you wouldn't use a hammer for every carpentry task,
right,
he also highlights the flexibility within Buddhist practice, particularly when it comes to ethical guidelines.
Okay.
He believes that finding the right level of structure depends on the individual.
So it's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
Okay.
Some people thrive with very specific guidelines.
Oh, yeah.
Others find them restrictive.
Right.
It's about discovering what allows you to cultivate that skillful mind.
Okay.
Which is ultimately the goal.
So finding what works for you.
Exactly.
I like that skillful mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like we're crafting something.
Yeah, we're working on something.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, you've got to start with the foundation. Right?
Okay, what's the foundation?
And for Ajahn Khemasiri, that foundation is the body.
Okay.
He teaches this very simple but powerful visualization to kind of connect with that.
I'm listening.
Imagine a line running down the center of your body from the crown of your head through your spine.
Mm-hmm.
It's about finding that center.
Okay.
Centering yourself, grounding yourself.
Right. So starting with something we can actually feel.
Exactly.
Like the physical body.
Yes.
And using that as kind of like a starting point.
Yeah. It's an anchor.
Okay.
In the present moment. Using the body as an anchor in the present moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about like the more subtle parts of ourselves?
Yeah.
Like, our attention. I feel like that's always like trying to like wrangle a very distracted cat or something.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. It can feel that way.
It's like everywhere and nowhere all at the same time.
Ajahn Khemasiri often compares attention to like this subtle force within the mind that's always moving, flitting from one thing to the next.
Yeah, like that cat I was talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we work with that?
Well, the key, he says, is to simply observe those movements without judgment. Notice when your attention strays and just gently guide it back.
Yeah.
Like you might coax a puppy back to its bed. You're not scolding the puppy. Right. You're just kind of redirecting it.
Okay, with kindness.
With kindness, exactly. It's about being gentle with yourself.
Okay, so we're not trying to like erase our emotions.
No.
It's not about becoming like an emotionless robot.
That's not at all.
Through meditation.
It's about changing our relationship to them.
Okay.
It's about finding that middle ground between clinging to pleasant experiences and rejecting the unpleasant ones.
So just kind of like letting them be...
Yeah, just observing.
Observing.
Meditation helps us develop that ability to observe without getting swept away.
So how do we actually do that?
Right.
Like, do we just like sit there and be like, I'm observing?
Well, he gives some practical tips for applying this to everyday life. Yeah. And one of the things he talks about is the power of nature. He shares this anecdote about how after his experience in Marseilles,
with all the chaos
and the sensory overload, he found himself just drawn to trees.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I need to be around trees.
Yeah.
And he talks about how he found this profound sense of peace just by being in their presence.
Yeah.
He talks about their stillness, their rootedness, and he found that incredibly grounding.
There's definitely something to be said for like being in nature. And
totally. It brings us back to center.
Yeah.
It helps us reconnect with that inner stillness.
Like, where do you go to find that?
What are those places for you?
Yeah.
Where do you find that peace?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And, speaking of finding peace in maybe unexpected places.
Right.
He also talks about walking meditation.
He does.
Which, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
That always seemed a little counterintuitive to me.
Right.
How is walking meditation?
Right. Because you think meditation, you're supposed to be sitting still.
Yeah.
But he's very clear that this is not just like a leisurely stroll in the park.
Okay.
Walking meditation, as he describes it, is an active practice.
Okay.
It cultivates awareness of the body. particularly the sensations of your feet connecting with the ground.
Okay.
So it's not so much about where you're walking.
It's how.
It's how.
Okay.
It's about bringing that mindfulness to the act of walking.
So paying attention to those sensations.
Exactly. And he suggests that this mindful approach can be applied to even really challenging situations.
Okay, like what?
Like parenting.
Okay, yeah.
Parenting can be tough.
Yeah, like a minefield of emotions.
It really can be.
Sometimes.
And he talks about how children are like these mirrors that reflect our own emotional patterns back to us.
Oh, I can see that.
Can you?
Yeah. Kids are like little emotional sponges.
They pick up on everything.
Yeah, no.
And so his advice for dealing with something like a child's tantrum is to approach it with that same mindfulness and honesty.
So not just like freaking out.
Yeah, instead of reacting with anger or frustration, he encourages parents to take a moment and look inward.
Okay.
What's being mirrored back to me right now?
Interesting.
Where is this anger or this impatience
coming from?
Okay. Is this actually about the child, or is it about something within me?
It's a powerful reframe.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reframe. Instead of just going straight to like, how do I fix this kid?
Right.
It's like, what's going on inside of me?
Exactly.
Okay, and speaking of things that are maybe easily misunderstood, we were also going to touch on karma.
Yes.
I feel like that's a word that gets kind of thrown around a lot.
It does.
And I'm not always sure I fully understand it.
Yeah, a lot of people think of it as fate.
Yeah.
Like some kind of cosmic scoreboard where you rack up points for good deeds and get penalized for the bad ones.
Yeah, like I'm being pretty honest.
Yeah.
I've kind of pictured it that way myself.
It's a common misconception.
Okay.
But Ajahn Khemasiri is very clear that karma is not some external force that's like dictating our destiny.
Okay.
It's not like that.
Okay, so it's not like predetermined.
No, instead he describes it as more like the natural consequences of our intentions and actions.
Okay, so it's more about cause and effect.
Exactly. It's like you throw a stone in a pond.
Yeah.
There are going to be ripples.
It's going to have an impact.
Your actions have an impact.
Okay.
And he also addresses something that I think a lot of people worry about when it comes to karma.
What's that?
That idea that we might somehow be responsible for other people's actions.
Oh, yeah. Especially the people we're close to.
Exactly. It's like that fear of...
Like our families.
Yeah. What if something bad happens to my child? Is that because of my karma?
Right. That's a lot of pressure.
It is. And it can create a lot of unnecessary anxiety. But he's very clear. You can only control your own intentions and actions.
Right.
You can't control what other people do.
Okay. That's reassuring.
It is.
Because I think sometimes you can get into that worry.
Yeah.
Of like, if something bad happens to someone you love, it's somehow your fault.
Yeah. And that's not what he's saying at all.
Okay, good to know.
It's about focusing on your own sphere of influence.
Okay, so as we're kind of like taking in all of this, you know, we're talking about meditation, talking about dukkha, impermanence, karma.
Right.
It's a lot. It all kind of circles back to that initial question of what does it actually feel like to enter this new reality?
And he doesn't describe it as like escaping into some other realm.
Okay.
It's not about like checking out of this life.
Okay.
It's more about experiencing this very moment with clarity and presence, free from that constant pull of craving or pushing away.
So it's like seeing things with fresh eyes.
Exactly like that child asking, why is the sky blue?
Right. It's about finding that sense of wonder again.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily need to like travel to a monastery or spend hours on a meditation cushion to experience that.
Not at all.
Like we can find those moments of presence in everyday life, right?
Absolutely. These teachings are about giving you practical tools that you can use to discover that inner peace.
Yeah.
No matter what's happening around you.
I like that. So as we kind of like wrap up here, I'm left with this sense of like, okay, life is messy.
Yeah.
It's full of challenges.
It is.
There's definitely some dukkha sprinkled in there.
For sure.
But it feels hopeful.
It is hopeful.
Like within that messiness, there's so much potential.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of Ajahn Khemasiri's message.
What is it?
It's an invitation to explore your own inner world.
Okay.
But to do it with curiosity and honesty. To really look at the patterns that keep you stuck.
Yeah.
And to experiment with letting go.
It's like we're not just victims of our circumstances.
Right.
Like we actually have some agency here.
Exactly.
We can learn to work with our minds.
Yeah.
Okay. So to everyone listening, as you're going about your day-to-day, see if you can notice those moments where you get really hooked by those shoulds or shouldn'ts.
Right.
Those cravings and aversions that just kind of pull us off center.
And in those moments, remember what we talked about with letting go.
Even a little bit.
Even a little bit can create a little bit of peace.
I love that. And as you're practicing, as you're paying attention, see if you can start to notice those little glimpses of that new reality.
What does it feel like for you?
Yeah.
Is it a moment of deep connection with a loved one?
Mm-hmm.
The stillness of nature?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just a moment of clarity.
Yeah.
Amidst the chaos of your day.
Those little moments of peace.
Exactly. And the more you pay attention to them, the more they'll start to grow.
I love that.
So keep exploring. Keep practicing.
Keep being curious.
Exactly.
And keep diving deep. Until next time.